Hello and welcome to Moneylife. This is Sucheta Dalal. This week, we talk about Adani. What else? It's making news. It's all over social media. So let's discuss what's been happening for the last 3 days. The big news, the headline, is that SEBI is apparently taking umbrage at being accused of investigating the run-up in Adani stocks. Yes, big mystery. Let's unravel it. So let's start from the beginning. The Supreme Court hearing on Adani Hindenburg investigation took a tantalizing turn when it ended up embarrassing not just the Securities and Exchange Board of India, a market regulator, but its reporting ministry, the Finance Ministry. How and why did this happen? SEBI filed an affidavit from a 22-year-old person on 15th May, where it claimed in the Supreme Court that allegations that it had been investigating the Adani Group since 2016 were factually baseless. Yes, the market regulator was denying that it is investigating Adani stocks, which have run up a lot. And in fact, it is angry that someone accuses it of starting an investigation. It is an Alice in Wonderland situation. But the added touch is that the basis of that allegation was a fairly unambiguous answer to a question in Parliament on 19 July 2021. Remember, we are in 23. Now, this question was asked by Member of Parliament Mahua Moitra, and the Finance Ministry, obviously, once it all came out, tried to douse the furor on social media by tweeting that it stood by its answer in Parliament. So who's correct? Let's first look at what they said to Mahua Moitra. One part of the answer, highlighted by her in a tweet, says, yes, ma'am, SEBI is investigating some Adani companies with regard to compliance with SEBI regulations. There's no talk about GDR or anything. The whole answer also can be looked at, but let's leave it at this, big and bold. As Ms. Moitra has pointed out, lying in Parliament is perjury. Lying to the stock exchange is also perjury. We don't know how SEBI and the Finance Ministry are going to extricate themselves from this. But what it now says is the Finance Ministry in that answer had said, and we have reported it in Moneylife in great detail, that SEBI was investing something to do with global depository receipts in 2016-17. SEBI has said, no way, we are not investigating anything. Don't accuse us of investigation. So they have denied even the GDR. They said there are no findings against Adani in the GDR. Why is that so important? And who is it important for? Only to Adani, because its fundraising plans have a problem if there is a pending investigation. But that's a different matter, and I'm not going to talk about it in this video blog. We'll keep it for the future. So we're now going to watch what happens, but let's discuss the big elephant in the room, which is what? Why does SEBI think that it's a baseless allegation to be accused of doing its job, which is to regulate the market, prevent insider trading, prevent market manipulation? But yeah, it sounds funny, but that is what the affidavit says. And remember, this is not just an ordinary group of companies. There was an extraordinary run-up in Adani shares, which in fact created an opportunity for a research-backed short selling by a global firm called Hindenburg Research. Nobody in India. The opportunity was global. We are now integrated with the world. So anybody can decide it's not under Indian regulation. Hindenburg is a US company, saw the opportunity and came up with a hard-hitting research report, which, as you know from previous video blogs, it was researching, it says, for 2 years. Now, SEBI says, 2-year report, we need more time. So that was what the whole issue in the Supreme Court was about. There's something interesting that SEBI has done in the Supreme Court. It has tried to frame issues in a way that it wants to limit the investigation around the Hindenburg Research report, specifically post-report, which is the sharp fall in prices. Now, the ramp-up has been going on for years before. That would be much bigger. There's not much talk. It's not saying no, but it's not saying yes either. Remember, there would be no short-selling opportunity unless prices had run so far ahead of corporate performance, fundamentals, future prospects, that it was worth somebody's while to research it and put out a report. Given the extent of rigging, which I'm going to talk about in detail later. Question that you and I would ask is, why wasn't SEBI investigating Adani Group stock prices at all? Secondly, SEBI was in the Supreme Court to say, give us more time, right? So the Supreme Court had given it 2 months. SEBI says it wants 6 months more. The Supreme Court says we're inclined to give you 3 months, but not more. And that's why the affidavits and the counter affidavits. So in the affidavit, SEBI has made a comparison with the powerful Securities and Exchange Commission of the US. Talks about other regulators, but specifically SEC, because SEC has a record of good work, has been turned into movies and books. So the affidavit goes into detail about what SEC has done. They have time for this research, mind you. And it tells the Supreme Court, look, we have to look at enormous amounts of data, excruciating details, annual reports, contracts, deeds, loans, assets, transfer agreements, various other agreements, minutes of board meetings, various statements and information from regulators around the world, from the Adanis. It's going to take, frankly, if you look at the scope that SEBI has outlined, I don't think 6 months is going to be enough, but they're saying we'll try and complete it in 6 months. All very impressive. Then just for one affidavit, look at the details it's gone into. It goes and studies what the SEC does. And it says SEC has conducted 56 investigations following short seller reports in the US like Hindenburg, and it took action only in 13 cases, which means there must have been some prima facie findings. And we don't even know what each of those reports were about. Maybe they said, okay, you short sold and lost, but we're not even getting into it. So they said there was action in 13 cases, and the investigations took anywhere between 9 months to 5 years, which means an average of 2 years. Remember, in India, regulators, investigation agencies don't do any of this homework. All this data that they're talking about, they frame questions and they ask the noticee or the accused, give us this data in this format, tables, Excel sheets, what have you. Most of the time, they give them 24-hour deadlines and demand it. I don't think SEBI does any different. I don't think it investigates and looks at all this itself. This is very clear from the huge investigation into the National Stock Exchange Colo scam. So my point is that 2 months, you have not even come up with a prima facie finding on whether this requires a bigger investigation. Prices were going up for years before that. You don't want to be accused of investigating that. Now, how does the SEC work? Does it do like a 7-year, 8-year investigation? SEBI is given numbers without details. Sounds good in the court. But we know from books that we have read about major cases. Only major cases become books and films, right? How SEC avoids long fishing expeditions like the one that's planned by SEBI. It focuses on the most egregious violations, negotiates with the small fry and their lawyers, reduces charges, lets them avoid jail time, and maybe get away with a fine in exchange for their cooperation and information on who was the key person responsible and how was the scam worked. This makes for winnable cases, right? SEBI does just the opposite. As we have recently seen in the Colo scam, it cast its net so wide, included every junior officer and anybody who could think of in show cause notices, did not try to convert any of them to become informers or give data, because everybody, even those who had left, were dragged in, even those who had done good work were dragged in. While it's telling the Supreme Court that to get all this data, SEBI repeatedly asked NSE to appoint firms and investigate itself 7 times. Okay, so much so that SEBI faced strictures for asking NSE to repeatedly investigate itself, which has not happened with the SEC. So if you want to make a comparison, you have to do a like-to-like comparison and not cherry pick some data points for comparison, right? Now, in the Adani case, it all revolves around the Hindenburg report, 12 suspicious transactions flagged by Hindenburg, loads of data that Hindenburg itself has given, and even more data that Adani has given in response. So it's all there, right? It's not that you have to call for it and look at it. There's a Hindenburg report and there's a fat volume of data given by Adani. So those of us who have studied and reported extensively on SEBI, we know that there is a pattern to this. Why do you spread the net so far? Because serious allegations They end up saying we could not prove anything. Think Colo again and go back to my earlier video blogs. And on small little things, you'll find tiny transgressions, you will nitpick, you will levy fines and say, yeah, overall, they should have been more careful and levy a fat penalty, which is quickly then overturned by the appellate tribunal. This is a pattern. And we have written a book called Absolute Power, in which we have pointed out how this pattern has repeated itself even before the Colo scam. Now, come back to the elephant in the room. Is there even a prima facie finding after 2 months that Adani stocks need to be investigated? Before granting the extension that SEBI wants, we hope that the Supreme Court will ask this question. It's not unreasonable, given what SEBI itself has had to say about how brilliant it is with surveillance and the technology that it employs. In fact, I've done a video blog on this before in mid-March. You may want to take a look at it, but key points that I want to highlight again. In its annual report in 21-22, SEBI claimed it had deeply integrated technology into its surveillance functions, which helped it unearth complex modus operandi with adoption of better technology and data analytics. In 2020-21, it claimed SEBI uses various innovative techniques such as pattern recognition, data analytics to process 550 crore trade messages that are generated every day. So it has that level of system. Again, in 21-22, its annual report had a box called Data Detectives, which boasted about using artificial intelligence and machine learning for their words, robust, agile, and scalable capabilities. And with fake modesty, it said, while it might be a bit of an overstatement, it might not be entirely inappropriate to say that there are very few problems that technology can't solve. 2 months down the line, we don't even know whether prima facie there is a case against price ramping in Adani stocks. Last data point. So apart from the data detectives, they probably operate on a boat in a data lake, which reportedly has characteristics such as visualization, time series, machine learning, analytical capability, ability to seek and search both structured, unstructured, semi-structured data, self-service business intelligence capabilities, in-memory processing of data, etc. And all this was used to complete 72 investigations into price and volume, 72 in 21-22 and 82 in 2021. Adani stocks, nowhere on the list. We have to come to how much those stocks have ramped up. It's not that they flew below the radar because nobody knew. SEBI monitors social media. Everyone has been talking about it for a long time. I think all of you are smart enough to understand this. So let me close with two important questions. First, the SEC expert committee. Remember, the Supreme Court had appointed a separate committee headed by a retired judge and a former SAT presiding officer that managed to give a report in a sealed envelope in 2 months. Now, we don't know whether that committee also found any prima facie issues that require investigation. Frankly, if that committee also said there's nothing to investigate, we don't know why anyone's time is being wasted. Has it given a clean chit? Key question. Now, if the expert committee has in fact found prima facie issues that require investigation, remember that committee did not have any of these data lakes and detectives, all artificial intelligence base that SEBI has. So it can't have gone deep into things. Now, if it said there is something prima facie, then why isn't SEBI admitting that in court? And with all this world-class technology, why hasn't it caught the price ramping before Hindenburg got into the act and made a lot of money by short selling? Nothing has happened in 2 months. Now, 4 companies and their price data, because we're talking about that being the elephant in the room. Adani Green rose 5,000% in 3 years, going from 55 to 3,000. It's now dropped to 875. So it's still high if you caught it early enough. Second, Adani Transmission rose 1,500% in 2 years, going from 250 to 4,000. It's now at 787. Adani Total Gas rose 3,800% in 2.5 years, from 100 to 3,900. It's now trading at around 700. Adani Enterprises, 2,200% in 2.5 years, from 175 to 4,000. It's now trading at still high, 1,893. Now, your question would be, Adani is great, it's brilliant, it will do better than everybody else. But let's compare with the peer group, right? So apart from looking at this chart, I'm taking one example, Adani Total Gas. Look at how it went up and how it has crashed. On 20th January 2023, when Adani Total Gas had a jaw-dropping earnings multiple of 850 price earnings multiple. Look at where its competitors stood. Indraprastha Gas was Mahanagar Gas and Gujarat Gas. These are the three competitors. Indraprastha Gas was at 19.7, Mahanagar Gas at 15.9, Gujarat Gas at 23.3. Now you can say they are duffers. Adani was better. But how much? Twice, thrice, four times? Is 850 acceptable? In fact, it has come down from 850 to 141 P, and the peer group has remained the same. So it's still very high, still a lot of confidence among people, and there is, you would say, nothing to worry about, but it shows you the extent of ramping that had happened. Sure, even as a lay reader, you can draw your own conclusions about whether this needs an investigation, Hindenburg Research or no Hindenburg Research. The biggest investors are we, the people of India, investing here in our market, our exchange, and our regulator is expected to do its job. Just before I completed this video recording, there was a flash to say that the Supreme Court has refused to give SEBI 6 months and has asked them to complete the investigation by August 14th. So on Independence Day, we will have a few answers. If you agree, subscribe and share this video so that other people learn and recognize and become as knowledgeable as you. Thank you.